Kurt, welcome to 2023. Happy New Year. It feels great to be alive, doesn't it? And it's one of those scenarios where I am extremely grateful for my health in the wake of what we saw earlier this week with
Oh,
Damar
yes.
Hamlin. It's just one of those scenarios where you realize what we do, you and I, talk about sports for a living, go watch sports for a living. Um, it's just a game, right? And then we're able to actually um, bring attention to a human being and his journey for as he battles for his survival, and just like the overall and overwhelming support from fans, the league, coaches, competitors, from like everyone associated. It was just so life affirming to see how many people have reached out to him and his family, and the compassion and care that we've seen, and it just renewed such a wonderful sense of life and hope for me as I've been reading as more news comes out. Hopefully, he continues to get better. But Kurt, what were your thoughts and takeaways when you saw that Monday Night Football?
Yeah, I was Monday night. I was at the Heat at the Clippers. I was at I almost called it the wrong corporate name, Crypto.com Arena up in LA. And we first somebody pulled up, one of the other media members pulled up the video. Like, have you seen this? Like on the phone while we were kind of outside the locker room. But by the time that had filtered through to the players and after the game, I mean, Eric Spoelstra comes out to do his post game media for the Heat, and the first words out of his mouth were about the situation and how the whole team felt. And I think I'd be curious for your perspective, because when you talk to guys, like, it was definitely on their mind as competitors. Look, for us, this is entertainment. For fans, this is our entertainment. This is what we do to escape. And I sometimes think we are quick to forget the risks that athletes kind of take on for our entertainment.
You think about the injuries associated in football, torn ACLs, right, or concussions, but there are certain injuries that come to top of mind, but cardiac arrest is not one,
Yeah.
right? Or what
Yeah.
we saw being transported to the hospital is not one that you think about. That's when you realize, I think, you're confronted with this trauma, and that was one thing that I kept thinking about, watching that unfold. The players witnessing prolonged trauma. It's watching someone they love and that they work with, their coworker, their friend, their loved one, battling for his life right in front of
Yeah.
them for over, for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes. And then for that to be live streamed, into living rooms
Yeah.
or around the world. You have kids, imagine like sitting around with your daughters, and your children watching that as well. So this communal trauma that we've all experienced, just this prolonged exposure, to me, that was heartbreaking. But I think the response, because it's always about, how do you respond to trauma? And I think that has been, like I said, so life affirming for me
Yeah.
personally, just watching, 5 million plus pour into Damar Hamlin's charity, the outpouring just across, like you said, not just the NFL community, but sports and much
Yeah.
broader communities. It's been, I've never really seen the NFL be so unified so quickly. All the teams seem like they canceled media availabilities. They changed their social media to pray for Damar. It just
Yeah.
seemed like this concerted effort to showcase the humanity in a sport that for so long has kind of been seen as a moneymaker or a commercial sport. And I loved how the league office just came out right from the get-go, and like, we're not even worried about the game. We weren't even focused on resuming play. We were focused on his health. And I thought that spoke volumes when the league office said that and then followed through.
Yeah. Especially for a league that has been put the shield first for on a lot of issues over time. It is good to see the rally around humanity, and he's in the thoughts of everybody at NBC Sports. I mean, we're talking about him on ostensibly our basketball, podcast and YouTube videos. And I think that has filtered through at NBC at all levels, the emails I've seen and the conversations I've had.
So our
It
thoughts,
impacts a lot of us.
yeah, absolutely. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. And for us, Kurt, our lives revolve around a different game, basketball,
Yeah.
and it has been absolutely wild the past few weeks. I mean, Kurt, I've been in my apartment in Queens trying to keep track, just like the sheer numbers people are putting up, but more importantly, the performances. I personally feel lucky, once again, this idea of just being, being grateful. to see Giannis do what he did, a career high 55 points, it was artful. You know, he was crossing people up, going coast to coast. Donovan Mitchell scoring 71 points, breaking that top 10 list. I mean, it's just kind of, it's been wonderful, hasn't it? What have been the performances that have jumped out to you?
Well, obviously Donovan kind of, we were joking because Luka, and I think I know I wrote this, Luka, you know, puts up the 60-point triple-double, which only Harden had done, and it's mind-blowing. And then has the line of the season where he's like, yeah, I need a post-game recovery beer. Like in the walk-off interview.
Unbelievable.
But like 2 nights later, or whatever, it's Donovan Mitchell saying, hey, hold my recovery beer. I'm going to go out there and put up this ridiculous 71, 13 in the overtime, but like just wild night of scoring. And it's been scoring is up around the league, like just team scoring. But the individual numbers this year, we're on pace for more in the mid 30s somewhere, 34, 35, 36, 50-plus point games this season. And the last time that happened was the early 1960s when Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor were just out there warping records. Nobody was playing defense. The pace of the game was ridiculous. It's become a parlor game around the NBA to like, what's leading to this? Why is scoring up so much? It's become a discussion. I don't know that there's one clear answer to, Corey.
In the 60s, I can think of one very tall man playing defense very well for a decade.
Exactly. And they won a lot of championships, coincidentally.
Exactly. And I think this is one of those moments you're going to see diversion, and I always love the diverging of, two roads. And I think right now we're seeing a lot of people score, and we're seeing the same people in the finals. All right. It's like, and I think that's kind of like a really interesting, but I don't know why there's been such I think it's a couple of different things. And once again, this is just you and I talking, on a podcast with our closest friends. I feel like on one hand, you have the rules definitely lend itself more towards a scoring game, right? It's basically impossible to play defense. There was one play when I was watching Giannis. Giannis was completely set, arm up, right? Wasn't moving. It was in the paint. Kristaps Porzingis fades away, shoots over, and I think his arm, barely touched Kristaps' elbow. Yeah. And they called a foul. And Giannis walked over to the ref and was talking to him. And I was thinking, what is that conversation like? You were in an incredible position. You're like, perennially a defensive player of the year candidate. So they know that you have a reputation for playing great defense like all the time. And you weren't moving, you barely touched the guy. Like if it happens to Giannis, like the rest of the league is out of luck. Like there's just nothing you can do. So I feel like that's one aspect, right, Kurt? I feel like that's probably the most important aspect, that they're calling it more in favor of the offensive guys.
I think that's part of it. I think there's a couple other factors. The current generation of players, and frankly, one generation in front, but the players coming through now, you grew up shooting the three. You are comfortable with it in a way that 10 years ago, a lot of the players in the league weren't. They kind of had to adapt it to learn to play. Now these guys are just like, man, I'm launching threes from middle school on, and there's a comfort level with that shot. And I think the other thing is this is partially where the analytics and the move towards advanced stats in the NBA comes in. It becomes about scoring efficiency. Everything's about, it's not, hey, you can score. You don't get a lot of just gunners who put up points. You're in New York. You get to see RJ Barrett. But there's not a lot of guys who put up an inefficient 20 anymore because coaches won't tolerate it. And you got to stop. Hey, you don't take mid-range shots unless you're really good at taking mid-range shots. Kevin Durant can take all the mid-range shots he wants, right? Like Chris Paul can take a bunch of mid-range shots. Well, maybe not this year, but there's certain guys who can. I think that shift is really starting to pay dividends. And what you're getting is also with one other theory I heard from a scout, which I thought was interesting, was he goes, we were talking specifically about Luka. It is hard to guard Luka when they have shooting on the floor and guys are knocking down shots, because if I double Luka, then Spencer Dinwiddie or Hardaway or all their other shooters, Kleba, whoever, start hitting shots and we still lose. When you put shooting everywhere, then I can't double Luka the same way, and he's going to be able to go off, right? You're picking your poison.
Yeah, there are too many holes in the boat. You plug one hole and then it pops out, the water pops out somewhere else.
Yeah, so it's just an interesting theory, but nobody has a. I don't think there's one. I don't think it's just one thing. I just think it's where the game's going. But
Yeah.
you made an interesting point. Is the pendulum swinging to a certain point, and something's going to happen defensively to swing the pendulum kind of back the other way?
I think the only answer to swing the pendulum back is to win. Like, and I'm talking about championships.
Yeah.
We talked about Bill Russell briefly. Those teams were so dominant. I think it's just like, it's kind of like the only other dominance that I can see was Michael Jordan in the 90s. Like, the only reason other people won was because he retired. It's kind of like it's such an incredible span of dominance that then makes people think, well, dang, if it's working for Bill Russell and Red Auerbach and the Celtics, and we should probably start playing defense too. But you need a talent like Bill Russell. I do think that that's probably the only way to swing the pendulum back. I will say one thing I think is interesting with all these individual numbers coming back from team numbers, because I think you're right. Like, to think that, okay, on any given night, Luka could score 50, and if you double him, he's passing to shooters who are looking at shot charts, who are only shooting, and they're planted in spots where they have the highest shooting efficiencies, right? And like, so they're only shooting their best shots every time, or they're not shooting. That's a really fascinating argument. But then also just where we are in the season right now, I think that we're seeing these high totals at this moment for a purpose. You think at the beginning of the season, people are kind of like still getting their feet underneath them. You see some pretty incredible performances early on, I think, and then it kind of like evens out. Then there comes a part in the season right now where it's kind of the doldrums, where you just got to get through games. A lot of people being arrested, and it's pre-All-Star break, which is kind of where people are, okay, we're in the marathon of the NBA, we're going to turn it on and then go to the finals. So this is like the dead period where, people are putting up crazy numbers.
I think it's made the season more entertaining, hasn't it? Like, I think it's been fun to, like you said, you're at home, I'm going out on New Year's Eve, and my phone is like, who's dropping 50 tonight? Like, I don't want to come home and work. I'm at a party. Like, I don't want to. It's kind of crazy how that's really come about this year, and it's made. But I think your point about the doldrums of the season and teams being able to go, you know what? So Luka put up 50 on us tonight. All right, we'll win the next one. I don't know that their teams are stressing about it right now.
Yeah, which like you said, it's an interesting conversation as far as, well, that period of time in the NBA is so boring. Historic, it's good. It's just like
historically,
it's a long road trip and these guys are being rested. Like, why are we even watch? But then now it's okay. Well, LeBron's playing in December and his birthday, he scores like 40 points, and the Lakers win. Like, that's a pretty exciting. That's a reason to watch in December. With beyond the Christmas Day games. Yeah. So I do think this is good for, like, as far as viewership's concerned, to kind of go for records in just January, like in this pre-All-Star break. That's a reason to watch, certainly.
And it's the big NBA stars doing it, which includes, by the way, Luka Doncic, who happens to be the featured guy in Corey's jukebox this week.
The only one.
The only guy. I say he was so big. He was the solo.
I know, when you put up a 60-point triple-double with 20 plus rebounds, I feel like that's worth it. Because that's the only time it's ever happened in NBA, 60, 20 plus and 10. I mean, that's like a crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. So I thought, you know what? Let's just not do a team. Let's just focus on Luka. Luka, to me, I think I don't want to misspeak here, but I think I remember watching one interview he did where he said he was interested in like EDM or dance music or techno music or something like that.
I believe that is correct. Without going into a lot of detail, Luka enjoys his nights out.
So I wanted to focus in on this and kind of like, throw him, because like sometimes we talk, okay, I'm like, what do you want to listen to? Okay, I'll find a punk band, or a jazz band. I know you love jazz, and I love opera. So sometimes I throw us bones, you and I.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw Luka a bone here since it was such an incredible performance by him. So I picked a song that many would think, it's called Music Sounds Better With You by Stardust, which is a supergroup, a French supergroup that only made one song, and it's this song. They had other demos, right? And so they're affiliated. I think it was a side project by Daft Punk, which is like one of the best techno groups of all time, right? Yeah. Legendary. But so Stardust made demos, and apparently they cut this song, Music Sounds Better With You, which samples a song from Shaka Khan, I'm pretty sure. And it was so perfect. Like, it was so perfect, Kurt, that they just set up shop and they said, okay, you know what? We can't exceed this. Let's just close what we've created and throw away the demos. And this is the only thing they released. And they just disbanded.
That's insane.
I mean, it's a one-hit wonder that became an act. It's not just like a one-hit wonder. Oh, this is a popular song I like to dance to, or like my parents like to dance to this song when they're in high school. You know, like there are some one-hit wonders like that. This is like, it's a one-hit wonder because it was perfect.
And then mic drop,
and then like hugely influential, and everyone's just like, this song is unbelievable. It's like a perfect techno song, as you know. So it's that's why I was like, you know what, a 60-point triple-double with 20+ rebounds. It's a one-off in NBA history. You know, you might as well just close up shop. Like, it's perfect. It's like a perfect performance. Like, can it be repeated? Maybe in 50 years, maybe in 100 years. Who knows?
Yeah.
Like, it's so one-off.
Yeah, it's LeBron's grandkid will be putting up those numbers, right? Like, so.
Yeah, but 75 years from now, we might see another one of those. I mean, it was so amazing. So anyways, I thought that was a nice kind of confluence. And the song itself, if you listen to it, it kind of gets into like this trance type of, you know, it's a dance music. And it's just like this really cool hook that says like, you know, music sounds better with you. And when I watch basketball, like, just basketball sounds, it just looks better with Luka. I mean, I'm just like, thank you, Luka. Just the game looks better with you, Luka.
Also, he was kind of in that trance-like zone, obviously. And then you've been there, like, as an athlete, you're not even thinking about it. You're just kind of, is it just you're kind of there? You're not even, I don't want to say not conscious of it, but you're not thinking per se.
Well, in flow, yeah, you can call a couple different things. You know, one name for it is called flow state.
Yeah.
And I think, without going into too much detail, I think flow state is generally, it's probably the closest thing I can, you know, people call it the zone, but I guess like the closest thing I can describe it would be, imagine everything is in slow motion, but you are in fast motion. So it's almost like you have this superpower and imagine you're like looking at your own body doing these things. So so it's kind of like a weird kind of thing where like, it's almost like you're playing a video game, or like you can just move around in normal thing, and everyone around you is like in slow-mo, and you can like telegraph, like, you know what everyone's going to do ahead of time. It's almost like it's a very weird place to be, and it only happens, in my experience, for very like short time frames. So like, it's really fascinating. He played like every game, like every minute of that game, right? And it was just like this beautiful, display of flow state where like everything, even that like last minute shot, like everything was just perfect. And it was like, how are you doing that? I think the answer is flow state.
Yeah, flow state's getting around the NBA this year, like we discussed.
Yes. So let's go to. I love your rankings. You came up with a new top 10. Number 1 is the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
And let's go through the whole list. But let's start with Brooklyn.
Yeah, we'll go through the top 10. Every Wednesday afternoon, evening at NBC Sports, put up the top 10. It's just become one of the traditions there, and it's people love them. People, I mean, I like to joke that they're completely meaningless because no sport would actually use media rankings to determine a champion. But that said, it's a lot of fun. And right now, it's week to week. So right now, nobody's playing better than Brooklyn. 12 wins in a row. Kevin Durant's looking every bit the MVP. Jacques Vaughn has, I think this is the big key for them. Jacques Vaughn has them thinking about basketball, Corey, not whatever Kyrie's thinking about, not who's in and out of the lineup. They're just, hey, we're going to play this basketball game, then we're going to go on to the next day. And it started against some soft wins. They did it against a soft part of the schedule, but they beat the Bucks in there and a couple other teams. They're just beating everybody now.
Yeah, there was one moment, Kurt, where I was thinking, I think Kevin Durant did an interview, and he was doing this media availability, and he was saying how all his friends like were texting him, I guess, saying, "Hey man, like it looks crazy over there, like what's going on?" And he was like what are you guys talking about? Like, you guys, I feel like he's like, the outside noise has always been about everything else, but it's kind of always been about basketball in-house. And I understand that's the message, like, you know, you have to you know, if you're like the leader of a team, you have to give that message out. But clearly, right, like the world could see that something was wrong. And now it seems as though you're right. Like they have shifted focus. There has been a clear adjustment. Like the ship has turned. But I thought that was pretty interesting to kind of understand I would say, the vortex, if you will. Like it's like Brooklyn is in its own space with its own atmosphere and its own rules. It's almost like, you know, when you have like a friend who's in a toxic relationship and like they think everything's fine, and then you're like, it's very clear that this is not healthy, you know?
Yes.
It's like the whole world can actually see this is not healthy, but you think it's normal. And then like in hindsight, you know, like in 5 years, or like maybe you're like getting coffee and you're like, remember that old boyfriend or girlfriend I had? Yeah, like that was really toxic. It's like, thank you. We've been trying to tell you that for like, you know?
You wouldn't listen at the time, but yeah.
You wouldn't listen at the time, you thought it was normal. And then now it's like the light comes on. I feel like finally the scales have fallen off the eyes. And like Brooklyn, like, or maybe they haven't. I don't know. Like Kevin Durant's comments did seem like they haven't fallen off yet. Like this is normal, and then everything is like on fire around them. I don't know, Kurt, but like that was very interesting to me. I was like, it seems crazy because it is crazy.
Yeah, it is. I think though they could be focused the rest of the year. I mean, obviously, I think Kevin Durant's always been kind of a basketball first guy. But you know, if you think Kyrie Irving is the distraction, he's in a contract year. He is playing for his next contract, and nothing gets people to conform like money. So we'll see what happens there. But they are number one, and number two is Denver, who's been on a win streak. They are the top team in the West right now, both in terms of the standings and just they've started to find a groove with not only Jokic playing like an MVP, but good games from Murray. They got Michael Porter Jr. back to help on defense. Aaron Gordon has been fantastic lately. I mean, their bench has been good. Like that's one of the things I wrote about this week, Corey. Why not Denver? In a wide open West, why not Denver?
I think that's a very good question. And I think a lot of people pending health would agree with you, right? I mean, that's always the thing with him is like the health question. But Aaron Gordon, I thought I was not worried, or I was more curious, I would say, of what kind of fit he would be. But for him to be consistently like a double machine for, you know, it's like, you know what you're going to get from him. That is, you couldn't ask for a better, you know, acceptance of a role. And once again, in that system through this season to where we are right now. There was a lot of basketball left. But man, I agree with you. Denver's exciting.
And when you put Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. out there, you get long switchable defenders. So you're better on that end. Jokic has become, he's not a great defender, but he's a less bad defender. Like he's figured out how to use that big body and get in the way. Number three is the Celtics. They have had some slumpy losses lately, but you're not worried about them, right, Corey? This is just mid-season blah.
Yeah. It's nice to have Robert Williams back.
Yeah, but I think and even Jaylen Brown pretty much admitted this after their last loss to a Shai Gilgeous-less. They didn't even have their best player Thunder team. It's like, you know, we've got to be more focused night to night. We're not. And I think that's just, again, we talked about it being a long middle of the season. I think they're kind of there. Fourth is Memphis.
Well, before we go to fourth, I do think the Celtics are a second half team anyway. You know, like they're more of a second half of the NBA team anyway. So I think to be in this position right now where they're giving themselves so much cushion, and you know that they're like, I was watching the 1936 rowing Olympic final. I don't know. It's what I do in my free time.
Was that a YouTube rabbit hole?
Yeah, I was like watching all of like these rowing finals, and I was, you know, like the boys of the boat, like there are these 9 like University of Washington boys who like beat the defending champions Cal for a spot, like, you know, in the Olympics in Berlin, and they went on like, you know, Germany won all the, like, I think 5 finals, and then there was one more, so they won 5 golds, and there was one competition left, and then these boys from Washington came in and won gold, and they all season long they were a second half team. Like they would start kind of slow, they would hold, and then, you know, all the other teams would kind of wait, like when are they going to turn it on, and then they would turn on the last 1,000 meters and just blow by everybody. And I feel like the Boston Celtics are reminiscent of the 1936, you know, USA rowing team.
Yeah, that's it. That is not an analogy I saw coming, but I like it. I do think that they have They do have gears that they haven't even begun to touch yet, and Joe Mazzulla's be able to get them there. They know who they are at the end of the day. Memphis is 4th and New Orleans is 5th. The kind of, I don't want to say surprise teams, but the interesting young teams in the West who are right there as well. Philadelphia 76ers are 6th. They've been playing a lot better, Corey.
They have been. Why do you think?
I think they've settled into James Harden is back and kind of healthy and found a comfort level. Joel Embiid continues to play like an MVP. Their role players are fitting in. It's an interesting discussion because I'll tell you that there's the parlor game conversations that go on around the league sometimes. Tyrese Maxey will be back in the next couple of week or two. Do you talk to him about coming off the bench? If your starters are clicking, do you talk to him about? I don't know if he's willing to accept it or accept it at least short term and see where it goes. But don't mess with it. Don't mess with what works. And I don't know that Doc would do that. Frankly, Doc probably puts Maxey back in as a starter as soon as he can. But it's an interesting conversation. Or do you start shifting the minutes and say, hey, Maxey, you're going to be more with the second unit. And I just want you to go ballistic. Just go get your numbers with that second unit. Take over the offense. It's going to be interesting to see how they fit him back in when he returns because he's such a dynamic player.
True.
Number 7, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have been fantastic all year. And they're, by the way, active on the trade market looking to fill in short term at the 3. That's obviously the hole in their roster, but they're doing okay. We've discussed it before. That Donovan Mitchell guy, he's pretty good.
It's the renaissance for him right now. I mean, obviously he was still playing very well before, but I feel like he reached another level. That's what I mean by renaissance.
Yeah. No, this trade was great for him, and as opposed to, I don't know, he thought he might be going to New York, and I know that was going home for him, and he'd be great with the Knicks, but I don't know that there was a team better set up for him to thrive.
Yeah. It's an unexpected blessing, and I think that, I really do think it's kind of like you're right. I mean, in hindsight, you're like, wow, that's actually a pretty great landing spot, but you would never have guessed it going into it, especially that whole drama.
Yeah, exactly. But they with the front line and Mobley. The thing is, this team is, I mean,
young.
Yeah, you're young. I mean, he's the old man at 25. I think it is.
Kevin Love.
Kevin Love is their veteran in the locker room, but of the core guys who are going to be this team is going to be good for a long time, and they're going to try to find a 3 to fit that timeline, which is easier said than done. But I think that's a team we're going to be talking about in the top 10 of this and talking about in the top of the East for another 5 years or so. So the Milwaukee Bucks are 8th. They've stumbled a lot lately. Although Giannis has picked them up with his recent run of he's been 40 plus in 3 straight games or 40-10 plus in his last 3 and picked them up a little bit. Again, you worried about them, Corey?
No, I'm surprised that they're this low. I understand they've been on a slump. I understand it's week to week, but because I think more macro. But on a week to week basis, I understand the drop. But no, I'm not worried whatsoever. I will say when I did see them against the Wizards, though, they did not look you could definitely tell they don't look very good. Which is Giannis was doing things. He split it was a 1-on-3, Kurt. This was just unbelievable. It was a 1-on-3, and he split all 3. It was a double team, one down on the outside. And on a fast break, I was like, how? And he got an and one foul. And I was thinking, how is that even possible? 1-on-3 to split the no help side and to go to the line and get a 3-point conversion. But the Herculean effort by Giannis just to keep you afloat, because that was a close game to the end. That should not have been a close game to the end. Just so I don't think they can rely on Bobby Portis to keep giving them these crazy numbers. If they want to be a great team. So I'm with you right now. They don't look very good, but Giannis is playing out of his mind.
Yeah, I'm just not worried about them at the end of the day. Middleton has been in and out of the lineup. He's missing time again with injuries. Drew Holiday has had a bunch of non-COVID related illnesses, and he's missed time. And they'll put it together when it matters. They know who they are. They know what they're doing. I'm not worried. Number 9, the Dallas Mavericks. Luka playing out of his mind, lifting that team up. And number 10, your Sacramento Kings, like the beam, Corey. It is the Sacramento Kings who are 3 games above 500, the 5 seed as we speak in the West. They're fun.
On. No, they're fun and they're holding on. I did not think they would survive this long. But like I said, the real test the wheat from the
Yeah.
chaff. You can tell post All-Star break. So we will see come late February on. But yeah, they've held on a lot longer than I thought they were. So credit to them.
Yeah, De'Aaron Fox has been great. Look, they made the Halliburton trade. This was a very Kings thing to do. They gave up some future for the now because Halliburton is, he'd probably be an all-star
really
this year.
good.
He's fantastic. Yeah. But that now is going to get them to the playoffs, and it's all about breaking that 16-year streak. It's all about getting into the postseason and saying, so we can stop saying they haven't made the playoffs in 16 years and then making jokes about what was going on 16 years ago. They don't want that, the pre-iPhone era. They don't want to talk about that anymore. So I get it. I think they're on pace for that. And they're like, the city's bought in, the players have bought in. Mike Brown has done a fantastic job coaching them and getting their defense up. So I'm pulling for them. I want to see them make the postseason.
Look, I want to see it too. But remember when I think Indiana was on the cusp a couple of years ago, where I was like, oh wow, this Indiana team is the playing team. Like they look pretty interesting. Like for a moment, I was like, maybe they could do something, and then Indiana kind of imploded there.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like, for me, I've seen enough basketball. I've been enough around the game for long enough where I'm curious, and maybe this is just like unhealthy skepticism, but I am curious whether this is like a shot of caffeine, and we're gonna get the coffee crash, and like you said, giving up the future for now, getting rid of Halliburton. Whoa. So I just think there's still some concerning moves happening in Sacramento, and I just wonder, if it's a caffeine shot. So I'm like, okay, this coffee's great. We're jittery. It's a nice buzz, but after this season, I understand the goals. Like what is a win for them? It's not winning a championship. It's breaking that playoff streak. That would be like huge, great, but at what cost? So, but you got to start somewhere.
And it's still tight. You're right, by the way. They're only one game up, the 7-8-9 in the West, which includes the Warriors, who have strung together some wins without Curry, all at home, because that's the only place they can win. But they're in that mix. Look, the Knicks are playing pretty well. They're just behind there. There's some other teams I think are playing well. The Clippers, I would say this, Corey, after watching them lose to the Heat the other night, I'm kind of off the Clipper bandwagon as a player.
Wow.
Now. Yeah.
Really?
I maybe they can pull it together. Maybe they can get everybody healthy. I don't think this is a loss without Kawhi Leonard, but I am less. I've kind of jumped off that they can threaten the top teams mode right now.
Well, welcome to the club. Man, I am very shocked because you were like a stalwart Clippers fan, as far as like in this race, as like a real contender for quite some time now, for a couple of years, and I could understand why. It's tempting on paper. I'm finally happy you saw the red flags and got off.
I stopped ignoring them, and the last we're not going to get into all the X's and O's and everything I saw around that game, but there were moments in that game where I'm just like, let's just say this, that in every team pregame, there's a whiteboard, right? There's a whiteboard and everything's written down up there. And in most NBA locker rooms now, there's video highlighting it, right? Like, hey, don't let Luka get to his right hand, whatever.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
there's video of like, there were keys on that whiteboard pregame that they didn't even come close to. And you could write it off as a one-time thing, but I just gotten to the point where I can't write it off with the Clippers anymore. So, So anyway, that's the top 10. It comes out every week, every Wednesday, like I said, afternoon, evening at NBC Sports.
I want to go back to number one for a second, because Brooklyn is always tempting. Before we move on to Kurt's Corner, I just have to ask here. I know you love soccer, and basketball, it seems like, is the first mover in the United States, but follows the soccer leagues. I think there's a lot of, I think, so it's really fast. I think soccer is really they're like the shadow leaders of like American sports, because they move, and then basketball moves, and then all the other American leagues follow suit. But we saw with Cristiano Ronaldo what happens with that Manchester United squad with Erik ten Hag, right? You get rid of Ronaldo, who didn't want all sorts of issues, and then now he's gone to Saudi Arabia, got a huge pay, I think it's like 75 mil a year, something like that. Got moved on. We saw what happened with Portugal as well with Cristiano Ronaldo, where he came off the bench. So with Kyrie Irving in a contract year, Do you think we see something similar to what Manchester United did? Do you think Jack Vaughn will do what Eric Ten Hag, is like and is willing to break ties and move on? We also saw the same thing happen with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Arsenal, who's sitting at the top of the table.
Yeah.
Like, tell me, do you think that's something that we'll see potentially?
I don't think so with Kyrie, only because he's playing well. Unlike Cristiano Ronaldo, who was not, he was just past his prime. He's not the same guy. He's the kind of guy, by the way, if he'd come to the United States and gone to the MLS, he goes to that Saudi Arabian, he's going to crush it. Like, you're not quite there to play in the Spanish or English Premier Leagues or La Liga or something, but you get down a notch on the rung and suddenly you look great. Ibrahimovic was like, I loved him when he was out here in Los Angeles. He wasn't quite an elite level European scorer, but put him in the MLS and he was just a walking highlight reel, right? David Beckham at the end of his career, kind of the same way. So I don't think Kyrie's there though. Kyrie's still putting up big numbers and still pretty efficient. So I think they're going to ride this out, and I wouldn't be shocked if he signs a couple years, like a couple year deal extension. I don't know if extension, but like some sort of new deal. We'll see. I don't think they're going to give it to him right now, but I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the year if he looks around and just stays with it, especially if they do well in the playoffs. I think a lot of it's going to come down to that, isn't it? Like, let's see what this looks like. But I wouldn't be shocked if he stayed.
Wow. Yes, I'm very happy that I got your take on that, because I think that's an interesting take. So now let's go to Kurt's corner, shall we? I would love to hear your thoughts on this NBA going back to Abu Dhabi. We talked about this.
Yes.
And you called the shot, went in. So I do want to talk about that just briefly before we move on to this recent article you talked about with overtime, the potential rule changes. What did you think about the recent move back to Abu Dhabi for the NBA?
Yeah, you talk about soccer shadowing the NBA, and obviously we just watched the World Cup in Qatar, which was certainly all about the money, FIFA. Look, they're going there for the second straight year. There was a game this year with the Warriors. This time it's Luka Doncic and the Mavericks reportedly taking on his old club, Real Madrid, for a couple of games in preseason games over there. It's just it's the league following the money. And I don't know, Corey, I have my moral concerns with human rights record and the criminalization of pretty much all homosexuality and what I guess that's the question. Like, where's that line for the NBA of chasing the money versus what you say you stand for as a progressive league?
Yeah, that's an interesting line. We'll see how they tack that course. I was interested in seeing, because we just saw an experiment with, a very, I guess let's say the experiment in China for NBA was an interesting experiment. Yeah. Tons of money. Then one tweet endangered how many billions of dollars worth of, and how many decades of experience, and they had Yao. Like, I mean, you think about, like, you had a Hall of Famer. Is like the whole system of, like, okay, well, we have a player from China, who's now running the league there, and he was a Hall of Famer. We have all like decades of work there and experiences, and all that could just be jeopardized with one tweet. And we saw the fallout. And we also saw what happened with Hong Kong, where the NBA has offices. I visited those offices in Hong Kong as well. And it's like, okay, well, that business seems like to be endangered. So you look at what could happen in Saudi Arabia. You mentioned, in Qatar with the World Cup. You mentioned that experiment. It's really fascinating with Qatar, because that one of the stadiums, they didn't even plan on having that stadium built for the World Cup when they built this city, like, from scratch. But once they got the Wall Street Journal had a great article about this. Once they got the World Cup, they just built the stadium, they retrofitted it for the World Cup, which is pretty amazing as far as like engineering feats. But that also means that as easy as it is to build something spectacular, for a world event, it's probably easy to shift course and abandon projects as well. How many empty Olympic stadiums have we seen around the world, right?
Oh God, yeah.
So I think what this is a really fascinating. I think it's a repeat of what we just saw with China. Like, if Saudi Arabia or any of the Gulf nations decide to kind of change their mind and not invest in sports teams, then I think this is a pretty big bet. The decades of experience that are just going to go, like that off of a tweet or off of a whim of a Royal, which is going to, I think that's a pretty precarious position to build an entire the future of the league on.
It is. The NBA, by the way, opened up for those. I'm going to blank on the technical term. The foreign investment companies that are owned by the governments of a lot of these Gulf states. They can now buy up to 20% as a silent partner in the NBA. And I mean, would it really be shocking if that happened with one of the expansion teams we could see it the second half of this decade? The team going into Vegas ends up being owned by the Fenway Investment Group, is a name you hear a lot, which is they own the Red Sox. They own Liverpool, but I believe trying to sell them, if I'm right, Corey. But Liverpool, that's a name you hear. If they bought it, but 20% of it went to the Saudi investment fund that owns Newcastle, or the Qatari one that owns Paris Saint-Germain, or some of the other ones. Like, it'd be interesting to see. The league seems to be chasing the money, though.
Yeah. So with the UAE, so with this Abu Dhabi game, it is interesting. I do think it's very fertile ground, in terms of like, where you want to grow the game. You have that project in Africa. We talked about the project in Asia, where the love of the game is clear. You're starting to get players, from those like Joel Embiid and Dikembe Mutombo. Like you start seeing like, okay, well, we have anchors in different places around the world. I mentioned Yao Ming earlier. The Middle East, though, or the Gulf in general, I don't know if you can you name any incredible NBA players that kind of are an anchor. I think this is one of those places where, in NBA India as well is another project that they've been working on for some time now. If you can get, one or two anchors there, in addition to like the decades of relationship that they're trying to build, I think that could be a fascinating place to grow the game. Because there's not much place left to go. I mean, where else are you going to go? Like Argentina, you have Manu, you have Europe, well covered.
But I think, as we've discussed before, the growth of the NBA, I mean, not that it won't grow domestically, but the real growth for the league is internationally. This will be the best basketball league in the world. And if recognized as such, if the best players from Europe and from Africa and from Asia will be there. By the way, USA Basketball is supposed to make a stop in the UAE on its way to the World Cup this year. Like, I don't know that they're playing if they're playing a preseason game there, or not preseason, like an exhibition warm-up game there on their way to the World Cup. But they're going to USA is playing all its World Cup games this year in an absolute basketball hotbed in Manila. But they're making a stop, at least doing a couple practices on the way over. So
the travel the show. That's the one way to do it, right? Get on a little bit of a road show. So let's talk about the overtime potential change. This idea of a target scoring being experimented in the G League. How is that working, and what's the impact, do you think?
At the G League showcase that just took place in Vegas right before Christmas, part of it was that there was a target scoring finish. There was whatever the score was, and it's much like the All-Star game. We see it now with the All-Star game with the NBA, the fourth quarter. If after three quarters it's 100 to 90, the target score at these G League games was 25 points more than the 100. So it was first team to 125 wins, and if the other team can pass them, great. What a lot of people started talking about was not doing it in the fourth quarter. It's great in the All-Star game because we've talked about the All-Star game, Corey. Anything you can do to insert drama and actual tension and get guys to play actual basketball in the All-Star game will take, right?
Yeah, don't get me started.
They used it a little in the G League this year, regular season, with if the game's tied, they're doing a target score. It's 8 points more than whatever the tied score is. It would be a little more in the NBA. It'd be, 10, 11, 12 points. But overtime would be just that, all right? If it's 100, it's first team to 112 wins. And we're tipping off and going. And that way, I will say this, it's been well received by people in the G League. In NBA front offices are looking at it and thinking, dude, I don't like double overtimes. I don't like the risk of 5 minutes. And man, if we can just do 12 points and get out, I think that there's some momentum. It wouldn't happen in the postseason. In the playoffs, sort of like the NHL, where they don't, postseason and regular season overtimes are radically different, right? NHL does what, 3-on-3 and then a shootout. I think in the regular season they'd consider doing it, and then in the postseason it'd go back to the 5 minutes. I'll just say this: there's a lot of talk about it around the league. I don't know if they'll ultimately approve it. There's a lot of, not everybody's down with this, but I wouldn't be shocked, Corey, if in a couple of years the league experiments with this.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I do really admire about the NBA is that they're willing to experiment with formats. Yeah. I think that's great. I would need to see a real-time example to kind of see what this looks like in an NBA level, because I just think the first thing that I think of is tennis, right, with tie break. But the tie break it's like win by 2, which in theory you're like, okay, well, that shouldn't take very long. And then you think of some matches like with John Isner, and you're like, this match is going to take like 2 days.
Oh, wait, did you know Isner's playing pickleball now? Like he was on professional pickleball. Like, yeah. Anyway, wow.
Yeah.
Randomly, he showed up on a TV. I was out then on the pickleball that came up after one of the bowl games. I'm like, John Isner is playing professional. Anyway.
Yeah, so I need to see it. It's an interesting concept. I need to see it in reality to kind of get a grasp of how it looks, because the NBA is such a fluid game, and it's one of those things where great idea, but then you see it and you're like, huh. Yeah. Like it actually, when you see the life of it in an NBA game, it actually, I think, would be much easier to tell. So I'm excited to see what it actually looks like. When we see it.
It's interesting because it came up with, like, I was discussing this, and then I know that they were discussing this. John Hollinger wrote about it at The Athletic out in Las Vegas. Like, you come up with almost your own set of strategies. If the goal is to get to 112 and the other team's at 109, and let's say it's 109, I might foul.
Yeah,
and make you shoot 2 free throws so I can get a shot at 3. Like the strategies become really interesting.
No, see that could be really fascinating, because back to soccer, I know that football coaches, basketball coaches are a fan of like European football coaches, because like I think that there's a lot of similarities as far as like corner kicks are like set pieces, right? It's like the same concept of an inbound, like an ATO. So I do think that the strategy aspect of like you'll be able to see great coaches excel, just like you see great coaches excel in ATO, like Taylor Jenkins or like obviously Coach Pop, the list the list goes on and on.
Rick Carlisle,
Rick Carlisle, like in this overtime format, instead of like, hey, Donovan Mitchell go score 13 points or whatever and win the game for us, or John Morant go off or whatever. I think that's a really fascinating idea. That it becomes more of a coach game. That could be fascinating.
I don't know if they'd stick with it, and it does it toys with the record books a little bit in some ways. When you switch those kind of things, so we'll see. But I'll just say that it's been successful enough at the G League that it's going to be a conversation.
So to end our year, let's take a look back at 2022 best stuff. What was something that you felt inspired by in 2022? It could be anything, What are some of your favorite things?
There's a few things. When producer Dan put this out there, I've had to stop, and I hadn't really thought about it. It's been such a fun holiday season with all my kids back home and home from college and doing stuff that I hadn't really. It hasn't been as reflective a New Year as I often have. So a couple of things when I was thinking about it though and talking about it. Television shows that popped. Ted Lasso, I don't know if that came out in 2022, the last season, but I
don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I'd have to look back. That's when I watched it, so it popped for me. I know that the new season is coming up at some point. That still remains. It's just you don't get enough shows that are about optimism, about belief in yourself and something bigger. So the optimism, Ted Lasso, plus it's funny. It's just well written. So Ted Lasso, and I've talked about the other one, the other show that popped for me. I loved The Bear. I absolutely loved The Bear, which was a Hulu show about a restaurant. So those were the two. And then I'm going to steal one other thing that I've been listening to a lot lately and love. I'm going to steal into Corey's jukebox for a minute. The Yeah Yeah Yeahs featuring Perfume Genius spitting off the edge of the world is easily my favorite song of 2022. I've always been a Yeah Yeah Yeahs fan, and this collaboration is it starts off almost dirge-like and funeral-like, and kind of goes into a great pop song with Perfume Genius almost as the Greek chorus to the thing. It's fantastic. So it is my favorite song of the year. So I'm throwing it out there.
Wow. Okay. Maybe we can, maybe we could just do, you can guest host Corey's Jukebox.
No, I do not have your breadth of musical knowledge. So no.
No, for me, Bjork was like, this is like, so personally, I kind of, like, I don't really like follow like new stuff, like this is like one thing that I kind of do. I more am interested in mining archives. That's just what I like to do for fun. I think maybe because it's my PLS background, program of liberal studies, that was my major at Notre Dame. And one thing that PLS you learn very quickly is like a mark of something that is substantial is endurance. And can it endure the ages? Can it endure the sands of time? Being eroded by the sands of time, and even the things that are forgotten, like knowledge can be recovered. Like Hildegard von Bingen, it's a Catholic saying, like she was forgotten about for hundreds of years, like her music, and then just recently there was like a renaissance and like a rebirth of interest in her music. I think in like the 1990s or something, and it's like it was hundreds of years after, like somebody found something and it just like sparked a whole kind of renewal in her. So I do think that enduring works of substance, they have like this phoenix ability kind of to regenerate themselves, which is why I kind of tend to, I don't like new things because I don't know if it's going to endure or not. It has to like go through that cycle. So when I was mining the archives of like avant-garde stuff, Kurt, Bjork is like, she's unreal. Like she's like an avant-garde, like, like I don't know, like she's like a seer, like I don't know, like a prophetess, like as far as avant-garde is concerned. So I was really inspired by some of like her album covers and just some like her like outfits and like her whole like aesthetic, like her whole mise en scène. Like she's like, I feel like some people are like, Charlie Chaplin was a great like world creator. I feel like Bjork is like a very interesting like world creator. So I was really taken by some of her work.
High on, by the way, my list of places I want to travel to is her homeland. Iceland is, I've never been. It is high on my list of Reykjavik, and the whole island is it's high on the list of things I got to get to. Once time and money aren't a concern. So someday.
For all the latest NBA news, articles, and more, why don't you head on over to NBCSports.com/NBA. Kurt, always a pleasure. I'll see you next week.
I look forward to it.